Where do I even begin? I guess this all started a little while after our move to Maple Street. My wife and I had finally managed to save enough money for a down payment on a small house in Hampstead, our beloved little hometown. We had lived in our quaint new bungalow for a couple days and were still unpacking our things when we got a knock at the front door. Opening it up, we saw a couple standing there holding a casserole dish. They smiled at us warmly and told us they lived next door, and were welcoming us to the neighborhood on behalf of everyone. "Wow, that's so nice of you," I said to them, taking the dish they offered us. "I'm Jordan, and this is my wife, Christine." They introduced themselves as Sarah and Greg, a married couple from next door. We spoke for a few minutes, but they didn't seem to want to overstay their welcome. Shortly after arriving, they said they would be on their way. "Let us know if you need anything at all," said Greg. "I mean that. If you need to borrow a cup of sugar, whatever, we're happy to help out." "Thanks. That's really generous of you." "Hey, that's what neighbors are for, right?" Not 2 weeks passed before I took them up on their offer. It's not like I was trying to take advantage of them or anything, but I was putting together a new table and couldn't find my tools anywhere. It seemed like they had been lost during the move. I just needed a screwdriver, so I went over to Greg and Sarah's place and knocked on the door. Greg answered and said he would be happy to let me borrow a Phillips head. He invited me into his garage while he went to look for it. He opened the garage door and I went in to join him. Upon entering, I realized that Greg was a compulsive neat freak. He had labeled drawers and cabinets for everything, and I was amazed to see an assortment of hammers, axes, and saws hanging from the wall, sorted by size and type of tool. Everything was clean and looked brand new. His table saw had no hint of sawdust or speck of dirt upon it. The blade gleamed like it had been freshly polished, though I could have sworn I had heard him using it just the day prior. "Wow, you're really organized." "Well, I'm an engineer, and I've been told we're an odd breed. I like to keep everything tidy, and I like to have a place for everything. Sarah thinks I'm a bit OCD. Man, this is really something else. I'll need to buy some new tools now, I guess, unless we manage to find mine when we get everything unpacked." "Well, I'd recommend Ted's hardware store over on Main and 5th. They have a good selection, and their prices are pretty decent. I like to support the local businesses rather than the big chain stores or online places, so I've been shopping there for years." He went over to a tool chest and pulled out a screwdriver. "Here you go. Just bring it back when you get a chance," he said, handing it to me. "Thanks. Much appreciated." After walking away, I realized we still hadn't returned their casserole dish. 3 weeks later, I saw the screwdriver sitting on my workbench. I cringed and realized that we still had their casserole dish as well. At least he didn't seem to be taking it personally. I had seen him just that morning and he had smiled and waved, acting friendly. I decided to go over to his place and bring the items back to him. When I got there, though, nobody was home. I felt awkward just leaving the items on the porch or putting the screwdriver in the mailbox, especially after accidentally keeping it for weeks longer than intended. So instead, I just took them back home and told myself I would bring them back on the weekend. Of course, I forgot to do that once again. We were busy running errands and the screwdriver slipped my mind for a while once again. I didn't realize that Greg was upset at all until I woke up in this dark, narrow wooden box. The same box he'd been in his garage working on for days. He had his garage door open yesterday while sanding it, and I'd asked him about it. It looked like a wooden coffin, except it was smooth and had no gaps in the wood. The thing looked sturdy and the wood was thick and strong. "For a little experiment I'm working on," he told me with a grin. "I'll show you when it's finished." I was trapped inside here when I woke up, feeling claustrophobic immediately in the small enclosed space. I still had my phone, but noticed that all functions on it were disabled, except for a couple of apps like this one. My breath caught like a dry lump in my throat as panic gripped every part of my body. Pure terror like I had never felt before began to consume me. I closed my eyes and opened them again, trying to convince myself I was having a nightmare. I wasn't. I could smell the fresh sawdust of the box I was trapped in, but beneath that was the aroma of wet earth all around me. Alarm bells began to ring in my mind, and I tried to convince myself that it wasn't possible. I didn't want to accept the fact that I had been buried alive. My head was still spinning from whatever drugs I had been unwittingly injected with. My arm ached with a dull soreness as well, as if someone had stuck me with a large needle there. Pounding on the wood above me, I found it to be unyielding and sturdy. There was no hint of weakness across any part of it. Feeling groggy and sick, I turned on the flashlight on my phone to examine the lid of the coffin which I was trapped inside of. Phillips' head screws were sealing it shut from the inside. Hundreds and hundreds of them. They lined the edges, spaced barely a quarter inch apart from each other. They spelled out a message on the inside of the lid as well. I used the flashlight on my phone to read the words left for me on the lid of the wooden coffin I was trapped in. The message from Greg read as follows. Dear Jordan, you should have returned my screwdriver. I didn't care about the casserole dish, but that was my favorite screwdriver. I needed it the other day, and it wasn't where it was supposed to be. Everything needs to be where it is supposed to be. You ruined it. You ruined everything. The voices told me where you are supposed to be. Underground. In the box they said to make for you. Bet you wish you had that Phillips head screwdriver right now, don't ya? Greg. I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. I don't even know where I am or if anyone knows I'm gone. But the air in the sealed wooden coffin won't last forever. I know that much. If you're out there, Greg, I'm sorry. You can have your screwdriver back. Just please let me out of here. I'm begging you. I'll be a better neighbor, I swear. I'll be the best neighbor you've ever had. I won't tell anyone you tried to kill me. Please, please let me out of here. You can borrow my shovel if you need to. Please borrow my shovel. Don't trust the man with the ladder out looking for his dog. Okay, so here's how my encounter with the ladder man went down. Again, I can't stress enough how important it is that if you see this guy, you need to call the cops immediately. But, more importantly, just try and get the hell away from him. I was on a first date with a girl who I had met online and she lived with her parents still. So she told me not to come to the door. I had a feeling she liked me, and after kissing her goodnight, I said I would call her the next day. She smiled and got out of the car, looking back over her shoulder at me and waving before going inside. The look back was always a good sign. I did a mini fist pump in the air and tried not to get too excited, but I was young and it was hard not to be. My car window was rolled down and I could hear noises coming from the backyard of Marissa's house. It was 1 a.m., so that seemed a bit odd. For some reason, don't ask me why, I decided to go back there and look. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that I had never had before, and I've never experienced again since. It was like a rock sitting in my gut. I walked across the grass on legs that felt stilted and wrong, my heart hammering in my chest as the noises could be heard getting louder as I got closer. It was a person making those sounds, I could tell that much for sure. But Marissa said her parents always went to bed early, that they worked at 6 a.m., so we had to be quiet or else we'd wake them up. As I rounded the corner, I saw the shape of a man carrying a wooden ladder. I hid behind a tree and watched as he put the ladder up to the back of the house and began to climb up. That was when Marissa turned on the light in her room. I saw that her bedroom was the same one the man was climbing up towards. He stood near the top of the ladder and looked inside at her, watching her undress. That was about all I had to see. Ahem. Excuse me, what are you doing? The man didn't look surprised or shocked to see me. He simply climbed down the ladder and strode over towards me. I backed away, unsure of what to do. Marissa was still inside her house, unaware of what was going on, and I was alone. Why, hello, young man. So good to see you out here this evening. The man was smiling impishly, his gold fillings and large scissors shining visibly in the moonlight. He was wearing a plaid shirt and ripped pants, and I saw he was wringing his hands nervously as he talked. Have you seen my dog? I've been looking everywhere for my sweet, beautiful little dog, and I can't find her anywhere. She's a brown dog, very cute. What do you say? Have you seen her? The man was much larger than me, and I was young and unarmed, so I backed away from him, afraid and anxious not to get into a confrontation now that we were face to face. I regretted not just calling the police when I saw him spying on Marissa undressing. No, I haven't seen your dog. She's not in there either. That's my girlfriend's house, and they don't have any dog. I hoped that he would get the hint, but instead he seemed to bask in my discomfort and naivety. Aw, no Poochie for the princess, huh?
How about you, Prince Charming? You like them puppies?
I backed away, the man's eyes wild and manic. He pulled out a knife and began to finger the blade of it, then ran it down the length of his tongue, leaving a long trail of blood. It looked like he was high on something, and I decided the best course of action was just to run away. That was what I did. With enough space between us, I made it back to my car and got the hell out of there. I called the cops from a payphone and then called Marissa straight afterwards. There was no answer at her house. I called again and again. The police came and interviewed me, and I told them everything. They said Marissa was fine, just scared. The man had left his ladder behind, and it matched the description from a string of cases in the area. A man had been going around the neighborhood breaking into places. His MO was very specific. He had been climbing up to the second floor of houses and breaking in. His targets were always the same, young blonde-haired women. When questioned about his reason for being in odd locations, multiple witnesses had reported him saying he was looking for his dog. He had killed 2 women, they believed, but what he had done to them before their deaths was even worse. Marissa called me a couple days later and said she owed me for saving her life, but that she didn't think she wanted to go out again. Whenever she thought of me, it brought to mind that night and what had almost happened to her. She just wanted to forget it all and pretend it never happened. I told her I understood. What else was there to say? We went our separate ways, and I thought that would be the end of it, until I received a phone call last night. The man on the other end of the phone was wheezing. He sounded old, but somehow familiar. His voice was distant and difficult to understand, but it was obvious he was smiling as he spoke. I always get my princess eventually. Now I'm coming for you, Prince Charming. Who is this? I asked, already knowing the answer, knowing that voice, even now 20 years later. I'm looking for my dog. Have you seen him? Click. It was an unknown number, but I called the police and asked if they had a way to trace the call. They said they would try. This morning when they told me the phone call came from Marissa Smith's house in neighboring White Falls, I wasn't surprised. She had changed her name or gotten married or both, but the man had somehow found her anyways, even after all this time. And now, he was coming for me.